23 October 2020, and I'm joined by two guests, Mr. Kennedy Mandaza, spokesman for ZANU-PF in South Africa, and Mr. Jason Midzi, ZPP Communications Director. How are you, gents?
I'm okay, and thank you for inviting me once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gambakwe. I'm okay. How are you, Mr. Mandaza?
I'm great, and how is Australia?
It's very good.
Okay, so today's topic is obviously the sanctions issue. There is a big anti-sanctions campaign being pushed in Southern Africa. Mr. Mandaza, can you tell us more? What is Southern Africa saying about the sanctions?
Thank you for once again asking me to clarify the position that the region has made in relation to sanctions. As Zimbabweans, to start with, we have always been saying that the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe are evil and they are a violation of human rights. And to some extent, people then were hoodwinked by the fact that the Americans and their allies always said that these sanctions were targeted. And we were saying that the sanctions were not targeted because the effects of these sanctions were borne by the generality of the people in Zimbabwe. And it has come now, as of 2019, it has come to the realization of the member states in SADC and the other member states in Africa that the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe are biting the majority of the people in the region. And it is now the responsibility of the region to speak out against these evil sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe. Not only is the region aware of the effects of these sanctions on Zimbabwe, but they've also felt the impact of the effects of the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe. Because ordinarily from where we sit, these sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe not on the frivolous reasons that the Americans continue to give, and they have been changing from one point to another, starting with the land reform, going to human rights. Now they talk about the reforms. If the programs that were being instituted in Zimbabwe were to succeed, then the other member states will now begin to see that there is need to take our land. There is need to empower our people. The Europeans and the Americans believe so much in Africans being subservient to them. And in order for Africans to continue to be subservient to the Americans and their allies, they would want to maintain a stronghold on global economic affairs by ensuring that the land reform in Zimbabwe does not succeed, the economic empowerment programs do not succeed, and if they were to succeed, then other countries would therefore join. So they are a scare tactic by the Americans and their allies to ensure that other countries do not follow suit. And our fellow brothers and sisters in the region have realized this. That's why now they call upon the sanctions to be unconditionally removed. But it is also backed by facts, because of late, as recent as 2019, there is a report that was made by the RAND Corporation. In their report, they likened the economic sanctions to carpet bombing. Carpet bombing is indiscriminate, and it tends to damage disproportionately the most vulnerable and often the most innocent people of the society. And this is what has happened in Zimbabwe. Whilst they say they are targeted, the majority of the people that are suffering as a result of the sanctions are the people, the ordinary people, the innocent people in Zimbabwe. And worse still, the Center for Economic Policy Research also said that sanctions lead to an average decline of about 25% of the gross domestic product of a country. In this case, You can imagine the impact of the sanctions on Zimbabwe over a period of almost 20 years. And if the impact is on the gross domestic product, what it means, it affects institutions responsible for the delivery of the public goods and services, which therefore impact on the daily livelihoods of the individual. That's why in 2007 to 2008, you had an unprecedented hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. You had so many shortages that were faced in Zimbabwe, and many other things that were as a result of these sanctions. Over and above that, the continued migration of people from Zimbabwe to the neighboring countries and other far-afield countries is as a result of these sanctions. And if we look at our region, we have so many people that are in South Africa. What it means is that the resources that were ordinarily meant for the people in South Africa, they are now shared amongst the people that have come here as economic refugees. And we have seen spate of xenophobic attacks, people complaining about competition in jobs, service delivery, and so on. And these are as a result of the sanctions that are in Zimbabwe. And we are saying, as a region, we need to amplify the voice so that the Americans can heed to this call and remove these sanctions unconditionally, which were imposed on Zimbabwe unilaterally by the United States of America. As much as they might say they are targeted, the target has been missed. And the people that are bearing the brunt of these sanctions are the ordinary people in the streets, in the rural areas, and those that have come out of the country in the diaspora who are trying to make a living and subjected to ridicule because of the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe. It's not these other reasons that they continue to speak about. But over and above that, we want to to commend the effort of our government, the effort of the president to try to mitigate the effects of the sanctions on the generality of the people. And the programs that they've come up with now, mobilizing local resources to make sure that we can begin to amend and develop the structures that were run down as a result of the sanctions over the last 18 or so years, can start to move forward. And we are now seeing the building of the rehabilitation of roads, construction of new dams. We are beginning to see the expedition in the mechanization of artisanal mining activities so that we can harness our resources on improving the uptake from the gold mining that is taking place in Zimbabwe. We are also having a number of other things that the government is doing to support agriculture and the local industry. And of late, especially during the COVID period, we have started to see an increase in locally produced goods to replacing those expensive imports that were being made by various quotas to support the Zimbabwean shops and industry. These are some of the efforts that the government are doing, and the president has come unambiguously and said that we will continue to fight the vices of corruption, incompetence, and lack of seriousness among government officials who cannot support this thrust of calling Zimbabweans to put their shoulders to the deck in support of the programs that seek to militate or we seek to mitigate the sanctions, the effects of the sanctions. So whilst we are doing this, we want the Americans to hear our call, to hear the call by the progressive forces in the SADC region and across Africa and the world over, that the sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe are illegal, they are unnecessary, unjustified, a declaration of war, and should be unconditionally removed.
Right. Mr. Mandaza, I'm very happy. I think everyone has clearly heard the description. And I want us to keep this very short because obviously most of our audience get this on WhatsApp. And I now want to go to Mr. Midzi, ZPP Communications Director based in Australia. Mr. Midzi, you have heard what Mr. Mandaza said. What is your comment with regards to what he has said about sanctions, that they are hurting ordinary Zimbabweans, they are hurting the whole of Southern Africa region?
Thank you, Mr. Kambakwe. I think any normal and right-thinking Zimbabwean will agree that the sanctions are the reason why you, Gambakwe, and me are outside Zimbabwe. We didn't want to be away from our relatives, but we had to run away from the effects of the sanctions. The sanctions are a weapon that America uses to advance its white supremacism agenda. America are the only remaining outspot of racism, and they go around the world trying to preach racism and punishing any countries or people that oppose the ideology of racism and racial supremacism. So any right-thinking Zimbabwean should be aware that the sanctions are real and are hurting everybody, not only the common Zimbabwean. Because it's demeaning for a vice president of a country like General Chiwenga to go and be treated in South Africa or in China. It's very demeaning. Because the first question they ask him is, don't you have hospitals in your country? It's also very demeaning for a former prime minister of a country like Morgan Tsvangirai and an opposition leader of an opposition political party like Morgan Tsvangirai to die in South Africa but not at Parenyatwa Hospital. Because the first question is, what has happened to your hospitals? It's very demeaning for a president or a former president of a country like R.G. Mugabe, the fighter for black emancipation in the world, to die in Singapore, because you'll be asked the same question. It's more embarrassing for those figures to die outside the country. It's the same embarrassment that the common people are having when they go to Parenyatwa Hospital and find no Panadol or find no advanced hospital equipment to treat them or to diagnose them. Is the same embarrassment that the leadership are facing. That is because of the sanctions. If you want to see that the Americans are up to it, you find that 5 hours ago, the Americans are very aware that this weekend, Zimbabweans are saying no to sanctions, and Southern Africans are saying no to sanctions. Africans are saying no to white supremacism and white monopoly and white capital. You find out that the American embassy in Zimbabwe has been awash. They couldn't spend a day. They were not stable, if I can say. They were not stable the whole day. They wanted to push their agenda to the common African that these sanctions are not real. These sanctions are just for a few. 5 hours ago at 1 p.m. at lunchtime, instead of enjoying their lunch in Harare, the ambassador and his staff, they were writing to tell the Zimbabweans that America has provided 3.5 billion aid to Zimbabwe for the past 40 years. That is sarcastic, because if you calculate it, it's $875,000 US per year. Can that country called Zimbabwe be run by $875,000 US per year? If they give us 3.5 billion in 40 years, how much business are they blocking with their sanctions and their white supremacism agenda for the past 40 years? It's trillions of business. And they give you 3.5 billion like we are fish, a bait. They also have posted on their Facebook page, the American Embassy in Harare, 2 hours ago at 4 p.m. instead of packing their bags to go home because it's Friday, they couldn't do so. They wanted to ensure that they've sent a message because tomorrow is a Saturday. They are not working. So what did they do? They wrote it to say, they are USAID for the past 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, helped Zimbabwe with 141.5 million US dollars. What is that in 10 years? 14.5 million. Can it run an economy of 16.4 million people like Zimbabwe? That is sarcasm. It's a high time the world knows that Americans are sarcastic. Americans are the only remaining outspot of a world dictatorship and of racism. The way they choked George Floyd is the way they are choking Zimbabwe. And we are saying no around the world. And all right-thinking Zimbabweans will be saying no. Only mercenaries will say yes to these sanctions. Only mercenaries will give us effects of sanctions as reasons why we are suffering, like corruption, like prostitution, like this criminal activities which are increasing. Those are effects of sanctions. So sanctions are real. We have to say no as a nation. All political parties, the Zimbabwe People's Party is saying no to sanctions. And it's not saying no today. We started saying no about 3 years ago, because that is a white supremacist agenda, a white supremacist weapon, which we cannot tolerate in today's world.
Okay. Mr. Midzi, I'm happy with the response that you have given, and I think you've covered a lot about what the U.S. Embassy in Harare has said. However, I want to pose another question as a way of wrapping up for Mr. Mandaza. The United States Embassy has given 4 conditions that ZANU-PF needs, or the Zimbabwe government needs to meet before the sanctions can be removed. So number 1 is the restoration of the rule of law. Number 2 is free and fair elections. Number 3 is equitable, legal, and transparent land reform. And number 4 is civilian control of the military. And then they ended by saying, if you implement the 2013 constitution, you will have met this requirement. What is your comment on
that? It is regrettable that the Americans would want to act with a big brother mentality on a sovereign nation. It is not the responsibility of America to dictate on Zimbabwe on what to do, particularly when it comes to matters that have to do with the people of Zimbabwe. It is here and now that the Americans should know that any reforms that are going to be taking place in Zimbabwe and that are going to be taking place in Zimbabwe, they are not being done to please the Americans, not at all. Reforms that are going to be implemented and those that have been implemented, they are meant to please the Zimbabwean people. And these are the people from whom the Zimbabwean government will listen to on what needs to be done. The Americans, they have their country to run. They have a responsibility to ensure the rule of law in their own country. They have a responsibility to make sure that they attend to the human rights violations that are at their height in America. They have a responsibility to make sure that they ensure free and fair elections in America without necessarily pointing fingers to other countries like they are doing to Iran and China. We have a responsibility as Zimbabweans to have elections in Zimbabwe that we believe are for the best interest of the Zimbabwean people. And if ever we will change anything in Zimbabwe, it is as a result of the dictates of the people of Zimbabwe, and we have been doing so. The constitution that they speak of is a constitution that was people driven by the people of Zimbabwe. And there is no reason that the Zimbabwean government can fail to implement its own constitution, which they took years and months to craft so that it can cater for the interests of the people of Zimbabwe. And we will follow it to the letter. And we have started to show that we have been following this constitution. The GPA that was signed right now to make sure that we attend to the issues that are enshrined in the constitution with regards to the compensation on developments or on what the white farmers had done on the land is a fulfillment of what the constitution says, and also an undertaking that is in the constitution to safeguard the property rights of the people. So it is neither here nor there for the Americans to dictate on what Zimbabweans should do. And we want to make this very clear and unambiguous that any reforms that we seek to do in Zimbabwe, and those that we have been doing in Zimbabwe, they will be for the benefit of the people of Zimbabwe. We shall not pander to the whims and caprices of people who have an agenda to make the people of Zimbabwe suffer through sanctions that are illegal, that are not supposed. We have no grudge with the Americans at all. We had nothing to do with the Americans. And as a result, we wonder why they imposed these sanctions. We wonder why they want to act as prefects of the world and prefects of Zimbabwe. We are a sovereign nation. We have a constitution that dictates what we need to do at any time, and we will adhere to that constitution and make sure that we follow it to the letter. And the president has been very clear. As late as yesterday, he said we are going to ensure that we demonstrate that we are constitutionalists. We are going to follow the dictates of the constitution to make sure that we protect Zimbabwe, we protect Zimbabweans against people and vices from the Americans who would want, like Vamidzi has said, to further their white supremacist, and that we will not accept at all. We fought the British when they were in Zimbabwe, in Rhodesia, and we succeeded.
Okay, so Mr. Midzi, I think we've lost Mr. Mandaza momentarily, and I want you to take us to the solution. Do you think asking the United States to remove the sanctions is the solution? Is there no scope for trying to address what they are talking about? Issues that they are raising, are they totally non-issues, or there's more that needs to be done by the Zimbabwe government?
Mr. Kambakwe, let me tell you something. The Americans have done more harm to Zimbabwe than Zimbabweans themselves. Because if I can inform you for fact that the sanctions tag, whether targeted or not targeted or full-blown, the investors from around the world, they don't care to dig deep and understand what the sanctions are all about. If they hear that a certain country is on sanctions, they shy away with their investment. So Zimbabwe has been robbed of investment since the sanctions were put in place in 2000. So a lot more harm has been done by the Americans. Now, coming to the issue of whether the sanctions will be removed or not, America will not remove those sanctions. Even if an opposition political party gets into power, like the MDC, their favorites, nothing will be removed. We saw it in several countries where they put their own people and those countries are suffering. Like Libya today is an example. It's just a shame in Libya. What you see, it's like an abandoned mine, a derelict. But now, what we need to know as Zimbabweans is that ZANU-PF and MDC And most of these political parties were set up to run a successful economy like South Africa. They were not set up to run a country which is under sanctions. That's why they are so confused and they don't know how to mitigate or to prosper a country under the sanctions. All these things that the Americans are saying this and that, or reform this and that, that is all rubbish. Even that same constitution of 2013 that they are talking that it should be implemented, they are very aware that ZANU-PF in that constitution gave in to reversing the land reform. That's why they want it to be implemented, because ZANU-PF gave in to reversing the land reform through the guise of compensating white farmers 3.5 billion like you had, and giving them 99-year leases. That's giving in and reversing the gains of the liberation struggle. Now, the liberation struggle was not fought by ZANU alone. It was fought by the people. The people who were bombed relentlessly by the Rhodesian regime. The people who gave food to the freedom fighters. The people who collaborated in the so-called the Chimbridos and the Mujibas, the war collaborators. The ex-detainees, people who were arrested for aiding the war of Zimbabwe. So the nation fought for land, but ZANU-PF did not give people land. Only ZANU-PF politicians took the land through political advantage. What do I mean when I say you have land? I say you have land when you have title deeds to a piece of land that you have. Where you come from, Bikita, Mr. Gambakwe, your fields that your grandfather left for you or your father left for you, you don't have title deeds. Like Chiadzwa, there are no title deeds for those Zimbabweans. If the government finds gold or diamonds in your fields, Mr. Gambakwe, or any other Zimbabwean, wherever you are in those called reserves or tribal trust lands, the government of ZANU-PF will come and kick you out of that land so that they can get the gold and the diamonds, like they did in Chiadzwa. So ZANU-PF have traveled with us for the past 40 years without giving the people who fought for land, the masses, without giving them title deeds to the bad land that they were given by the Rhodesian regime. Now we come to today. If you find the politicians of ZANU-PF, they do have farms and they have title deeds. They gave one another farms, but they did not give people the land. So ZPP is saying we need a disciplined political party like the Zimbabwe People's Party to come and nationalize the land. By nationalizing, we are saying the land that the ZANU-PF politicians have, which they gave themselves title deeds to through political advantage, is going to be nationalized. They are not going to hold on to it. And those whites whom they are giving those 99-year leases and the other ones whose land they stole was not taken is going to be nationalized by ZPP. We're not going to take the land to ourselves, but to nationalize so that that land starts to belong to the nation of Zimbabwe, so that the future generations of Zimbabweans will find this land not in the name of Mnangagwa's children, not in the name of Chiwenga's children, or Mizi's children, or Mandaza's children, but just in the name of Zimbabwe, with the government of the day farming to feed its people. Because what we need to know is the pillars of Zimbabwe's economy are land and mines. So if we privatize land and mines, we cannot help anybody, because with this kind of corruption, nothing will happen. We are going to privatize and take back all the land that was stolen by the ZANU-PF politicians and people who are associated to them, and also the few remaining white colonizers who are still holding on to Zimbabwe's land. It is going back to the nation of Zimbabwe, so that future generations and current generations can feast off the land. This is the ZPP. And that's our turnaround strategy.
Right.
I would have
Mr.
wanted
Jason
to know
Midzi.
why. I would have wanted to know why Mr. Mandaza's political party has not given me from Buhera title deed to the land that my father left for me, and him himself, why he doesn't have title deed to that
Okay.
same birthplace.
Right. So I think the point is met, and I think we'll continue to have this conversation as we go into Sunday, the 25th of October, where people are going to be marching in Zimbabwe and in South Africa. So I don't want us to continue for longer because Mr. Mandaza is obviously dropped off. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
I would like to say we agree with the ZANU-PF in as far as sanctions should go is concerned, because no Zimbabwean should be given sanctions by a person of another nationality. That is wrong. If we are fighting, we fight in our own home and we go out and face the other people as one person. Now, we differ with the ZANU-PF on land tenure, land ownership, land use, transparency, and accountability. That's where we differ with them. But we agree sanctions should go.
Okay. Mr. Jason Midzi, and you are the, I'm sorry for putting Mr. Mandaza's number on your screen there. I'm going to put your correct number, and you are the communications director for ZPP. I really enjoy talking to you, and I think this issue is with us now for more than 10 years. And you are a fresh voice when it comes to how sanctions are affecting Zimbabweans. Thank you very much for talking to me today, and I hope that we'll have you again before the 25th of October when the marches take place. Are you going to be having people on the ground joining these marches?
Yes, our members in South Africa are going to join our brothers in ZANU-PF and MDC and any other Zimbabwean who is going to join this march to say no to the Americans, to tell them to remove their useless and white supremacist sanctions.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Midzi, and I'll talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you very much.